Good morning, Mike and Arlen. Our Philippine journey. Thank you so much for dropping in. Subscribers, viewers, watchers, lurkers, trolls. We appreciate all of you, and we definitely appreciate those of you that make comments. The latest tourism numbers are out here in the Philippines. Actually, they've been out for about a week, but I've waited because I wanted to see if there was going to be a change before I put this video out. However, you know, while it's not dismal, it's not the greatest news in the world. Let's talk about it.
Why'd you have to go? I guess this world's too slow for you. I think there's beauty in the gray, the cold, but you just want the gold. And there's no way I can beat it, cause I got no chance when it comes to her. She got the glitter and the fame, and I just wasn't enough.
So, the latest numbers are out, and we've had a hard time. There for about 3 months, there were no tourism numbers. They were moving website. They've integrated it into their now main site. I've been through this with a previous video, which brings me up to a couple of comments before we start. And that has been, Mike, what's the big deal? Why do you bother? I mean, we appreciate the info. It's interesting, but why do you put such an emphasis on it? Well, I will tell you why. Tourism represents a large chunk of change to the economy here in the Philippines. And we'll go through that in just a minute. But it's an economic indicator. And for those of you that are considering becoming a tourist, becoming an expat, moving, staying, leaving, one of the things that you look at is the economic strength that you might have in the future, or might be losing. In other words, should I buy a property? Should I invest in a condo? Should I look at all of these types of things? Is this going to be the move? Am I going to be happy? All of these things are driven by the economy. The economy, is the first indicator. The political positions are the second indicators. But as a foreigner, we have no control over the political situations. We have to kind of go with the flow. And so we have to watch the news. And, quite honestly, the news is not always unbiased. That's the best word that I could use. All right? That doesn't mean anything. So, we've been here 10 plus years. We watch the economic indicators because this is where we intend to stay. And unless it gets ugly, we'll move on. But we've had the global events throughout the world and all the economic events going on across the world. How's this impacting tourism? And why does it make that much of a difference? Well, let's take a look at this first. International tourism, exact contribution to the Philippines' GDP, is not broken out separately. All right. And what they mean by that is very simple. The Philippines tracks incoming tourism, and incoming, because we're an island nation, it's only two ways to come in. One of which is really rarely used, and that's by sea, all right, through the ports. But the other is by the airlines. And these are easy to track because while you may not be aware of it, there's a tax included in your ticket, and that these airlines pay these things, okay? So it's easy to track that. Then, of course, you've got to clear immigration, you've got to clear customs. It's all being tracked. But at that point, it pretty much gets lost from the individualized piece. In other words, now Everything else goes into tourism. All right. So overall, tourism contributed 8.9% to the economy, to the GDP in 2024, according to the Philippine Statistic Authority. Inbound tourism expenditures alone, which represent international spending, reached approximately 700 billion in 2024. Approximately. And they don't track it that well. And I can tell you why we say that. We say it because I can go as a tourist, all right? Now, even though I'm a 13A, I'm married to a Filipina, I have a spousal visa, 13A, all right? The hotel doesn't know. Nobody knows what we spend. There's no, every time we go out to dinner, I'm being charged the same thing as Filipinos, or sort of, kind of. All right. We won't get into skin tax. But my point is they don't know the difference between you sitting at a table beside me spending money and me. So they really don't know for sure. And I have still got this little head cold, so kind of bear with my voice just a little bit. All right. Now, inbound tourism, so this is what we were able to track, accounts for 699.98 billion. All right. And the indicator on that is the direct gross, the TTGVA, which measures the contribution of tourism to the economy, which was estimated at 2.35 trillion, an increase from 2023. Now, obviously, we don't have 2025 numbers, but either way, my point with all of this is that this is a really tricky situation, and it kind of lies the same way in other countries. I mean, if Arlen and I go to Thailand, or if we go to Japan, or we go to Bali, or we go wherever, all right, they don't know whether I live there or not when I go to a restaurant or when I go to a resort or whatever. All right. The resorts, you know what? I can show them, literally, I can show them my driver's license to check in. I could show them my Arizona driver's license, but that's since expired long ago. But I can show them my Philippine driver's license. So if I show them my Philippine driver's license, am I a tourist? Am I an international tourist? How does that work? My point there is you don't have to show the passport all the time. Now, some places do require it, all right? They will only accept a Philippine government issued ID. And as a tourist, you aren't going to have one, except, yeah, you would. You would have one. For many, you can be a tourist here for 3 years nonstop. You just keep renewing that visa. So, but let's get into the actual numbers. The numbers is what's really interesting here. And I know that's why you're waiting. All right. So, in the red box, what we show is January through August 2025. We show a couple of different things, but the third block from the left, January through August 2025 and January through August 2024. And then there's a growth rate, positive or negative. Now, what is nice is the Philippines does track the difference between tourism coming in on a Philippine passport, entry into the country on a Philippine passport, versus entry on a foreign passport. Now, what they don't do, and I don't know how they would, but suppose it's not really tourism. Suppose you have an OFW, all right, that's coming here to visit their family on vacation. Is that considered tourism? I don't know. I really don't. But either way, they do separate them. So overseas Filipinos, they account for 9.2%. But first off, let's look at the third box from the left. January through August 2025. So that's the current one. 3,963,000 and change versus, that's the grand total, excuse me. All right. Versus January through August 2024, 4,028,000. All right. It's not really that much of a difference. It's only off by one. It's only down 1.5%. Okay. So OFWs, you can see in the box all the way to the right, it's actually up 12%. So a lot of OFWs did not make it last year because of all kinds of reasons, but we won't go into them. But then let's look at January through August 2025, all right? Total foreign, that's the bottom number, 3,602,000 versus January through August 2024, 3,705,000. Well, that's only 100,000 different spread out over 9 months. And then if you look, I left this up so you can see the numbers. South Korea, United States, Japan, Australia, China, all of the numbers from the different countries because they do break it out. Now, the list is much longer. I don't see any need in showing, entries that are under 20,000. So I'm not going to make more things. But what you will notice is the South Koreans are still down for the year to date. And that's because they've been a lot of bad press and travel advisories in South Korea about the Philippines. The United States is up about 8,000, and U.S. is number 2. It's at 637,000. 689,000 entries this year. Japan's up considerably. China is just, we threw the Philippine government threw the Chinese out because of the pogos, the gambling and scam places and everything else. And with that being said, the Chinese government has really put the clamps down on how many Chinese can come. Now, the UK is way down. And, let's talk about that for just a second. We've got people that are up, people that are down. The numbers aren't as strong. Obviously, other Southeast Asia countries have bigger growth, not necessarily bigger numbers, but bigger growth, although many do have bigger numbers. But, they have a geographic advantage in that they're bordered by countries and you only have to walk across the border. You have to fly in or boat in, one or the other. With all of that being said, what happens here is simply world economics, global pressure, and everything that goes along with that. We are in a very difficult time right now, a very difficult time globally. Globally, I mean, if you look at, they're having protests in Australia, nothing major, but they're having them. You have everything that's happening in the U.S. Oh my God, it's just a travesty what's happening there. It's absolutely horrible. And then you look at the UK, and the UK, it is a battle. It is, I look at the United Kingdom as a litmus test as to what we may very well see happening in other countries. The people in the UK are just sick and tired of migrants and illegal immigrants and everything else, and having their entire social system spending money nonstop. The protests in the UK over Middle East, over migration, over everything, I think this may actually be foreshadowing about what may happen in the near future in the U.S. I think there are limitations. I really do. But those are the numbers. Now, does it mean anything? Well, yeah, it does. Because when you see these changes, when you notice this as a huge economic driver, you have to look at why aren't these people coming? You have to look at what's going on throughout the world and globally, how events are shaping up. And how you decide what is relevant or not, that's a totally different story because it may not be relevant. It may be, just throwing a dart at the board or spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. I mean, we will get people that will tell you in the comments, why would I live in the Philippines? That's like living in Satan's ass crack. Well, that's your opinion. It's, if what you can afford is Satan's ass crack lifestyle, that's fine. I think we afford, or Lynn and I afford, a pretty nice lifestyle. I certainly don't consider it Satan's ass crack. That's for sure. But we do understand that people, there are different views, different opinions, and we welcome those in the comments as well. Otherwise, please do subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and the notify bell so that you can see this later. In other words, thank you. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Be safe.